What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to Tactical Tortoise. My name is Trevi, and today we're going to be going over the list breakdown for the T5S2 Tabletop Simulator 40K tournament that's running right now. I made a short announcement video for this tournament the other day, and it almost immediately filled up. I was originally going to run it for 8 people. We ended up running it for 16, and we have a number of people on the wait list. So, assuming that this one gets off the ground without a hitch, we're probably going to start another heat as soon as we work out some last details. So, stay tuned for that. If you guys want to join the Tabletop Simulator tournament, we're using ITC rules. It's going to be super awesome. You just play one game a week, and we'll have some prizes at the end. Go ahead and hit us up. You can hit us up on Facebook at facebook.com/tacticaltortoise, or maybe send a message on Patreon. Either one of those work, and we'll get you on the wait list. And as soon as we start the next heat, you will be first in line to jump in. So lists just finished being submitted for the first T5S2 tournament. So a pretty interesting breakdown of factions here. 16 players coming in, like I said before, and a lot of Imperium presence, almost no Xenos, which actually surprised me. I think a lot of the Xenos factions are in a really good spot right now. Tyranids got a big bump up in the 2020 ICC packet. Orcs just came out with their Psychic Awakening book, got a bunch of new abilities from that, and the ITC packet helps them out a ton as well. Tau Empire still basically in the same place that they were before, but the new ITC I think helps them as well because they do have the ability to take the center of the table really well. That said, we see a ton of Adeptus Sororitas coming out, which is really surprising to me. That kind of threw me for a loop, but we have seen some competitive success from Adeptus Sororitas in the past, and one thing I should talk about is that the boards we are using are fairly terrain heavy, so they melee heavy Adeptus Sororitas builds might be pretty effective in this particular event. So we have a rules packet here, and as you can see, we're going to be using the BCB ITC Ruins map for all games in the tournament. This is a pretty terrain-heavy map, but I do think it's pretty balanced. Because of the orientation of these L's, in a lot of matchups, you can actually get fairly solid lines of sight through this area. So the L's aren't quite as effective as blocking line of sight as a lot of Nova L setups would be, and a shooting army can still compete, but it is a little tougher. Another big part of this map are these corner ruins. They are pretty far away from the action, but any sort of flanking units are going to be able to approach outside of line of sight pretty easily. There's also 2 ruins here and here, both of which are fairly large and can fit potentially multiple units inside them to block line of sight. So there's a lot of line of sight blocking terrain in deployment zones, which I think is going to really mitigate alpha strikes that people are going to be able to put out. So for that reason, I do think we're seeing a lot of Adeptus Sororitas. I think, like I said before, they also saw some competitive success, and I think people are just going to pick them up and try to give them a go. We have 2 Space Marine lists coming in. One of them is a Centurion spam list. Using aggressors now with the Raven Guard ability to forward deploy those guys, so that'll be really interesting to see how that list goes. And we have a ton of Chaos making it out. So for exactly the reason that I was talking about Xenos being powerful, I think Chaos is also going to be powerful. They tend to be more aggressive, and they tend to take a lot of board space, and having these big pieces of terrain around the edges of the table are going to be really, really powerful for them. We can go through some interesting lists. First up from Curie here, we have a Dark Angels list, and I think this is pretty standard of what we're going to see from a lot of Dark Angels. It's not super heavy into either Deathwing or Ravenwing, but it does use the 2 together pretty well. We see a Ravenwing Attack Squadron Specialist Detachment that allows any of the Ravenwing units in this detachment to leave combat after they fight, so they get a hit and run ability. That means it affects Samael and the Talon Masters potentially, or even this big unit of 9 Ravenwing Black Knights. So any of those can charge in, deal their damage, and then leave combat and not get reciprocated on. There's even a unit of Deathwing Knights here, so if you have the Talon Masters jumping over the Deathwing Knights to charge enemy units, they can even fight and then move backwards behind them. Because the Talon Masters are characters and they're lower than 10 wounds, they can't be shot as long as something else is closer. And there's a lot of scouts in here, and there's this big old unit of Deathwing Knights that could potentially screen for them. There's a couple other cool combos with this list. First one is the Signal of the Attack Stratagem from that Ravenwing Attack Squadron, which for 1 CP gives +1 to hit against a unit that any of your Ravenwing Attack Squadron units, so that's going to be these guys and the Ravenwing Black Knights, deals a wound to. So that means potentially like this Ravenwing Apothecary could come in. He's got a Plasma Talon on his bike, so an Assault 2 Plasma Gun effectively. He can go in, potentially overcharge, take a big shot. He has rerolls from Samael, so he's not that likely to blow himself up. And assuming he gets 1 wound through, procs that ability gives the entire Ravenwing Black Knight squad +1 to hit, so none of their Plasma Talons will overheat once they shoot. Pretty cool combo there. The other thing they can do is use the new combined assault stratagem to deep strike the Deathwing Knights 6 inches off of the Ravenwing Black Knights. You can potentially move Ravenwing Black Knights 2 times, and they can advance both times. Because they have a turbo boost ability because they're Space Marine bikers, they can move 20 inches, then double move for an additional 20 inches. Then you can use the combined assault stratagem to drop in this big unit of 8 Deathwing Knights here within 6 inches of them and just outside 6 inches of enemy units. So they're coming in with just a 6-inch charge. Pretty easy to make that. And these guys hit like trucks in melee. So a lot of cool stuff going on. I really like to see Dark Angels back on the table, and it'll be interesting to see how they do. We have a lot of very interesting and very aggressive chaos lists coming out here. Hobby Wrecker is bringing in a list with triple Keeper of Secrets, which I think is going to be awesome. I unfortunately don't quite know as much about this list as I would like. There's obviously a lot of very fast moving units in it. Everything is Mark of Slaanesh, so it's all going to be potentially affected by the Slaaneshi psychic powers, which are all very powerful. So this list also brings 9 Warp Talons in that can deep strike in with their Warp Flame Strike ability. They become immune to Overwatch when they deep strike in, and because this detachment is a Night Lord's detachment, it does all Mark of Slaanesh, but we have the Night Lord's Legion going on here. They can use the Raptor Strike ability to roll 3d6 on their charge rather than 2d6, so they have a pretty good chance of getting in there, and then use the We Have Come For You stratagem to force enemies to stay in melee and prevent them from falling back. So that's a pretty good combo in there to stop gun lines from really ripping up these Keepers of Secrets. The Keepers of Secrets are fast and hit very hard, but they are a little squishy, so anything that can put down significant fire on them could be problematic. I am just noticing right now we also have a Shalaxi Hellbane in this list, so technically we got 4 Keepers of Secrets. This is going to be awesome to see on the table. I'm so excited. Hope we get to spectate some of these games because it's going to be cool to just to see all these bottles on the table. Over here's a list that I made me do a double take when it first got submitted. I actually love this. This is from Chrome Rose. We have a pure Astra Militarum list, and get ready for this, boys. So we start with a full-on brigade detachment. We got a bunch of infantry squads, a bunch of elite characters to fill out the elite choices there, scout sentinels to fill out fast attack, basilisks, and heavy weapon squads to fill out heavy support. Astra Militarum obviously make one of the best brigades in the entire game. They have a lot of cheap infantry, they have a lot of cheap options for all of these slots, and they can just fill them all in. Plus, it's all fairly effective. You're never going to say no to a heavy weapons team. They don't do a ton of damage, but they are very difficult to stop, and they're typically a great inclusion, especially in a meta that's sort of trending towards a lot of high model count horde lists. Having those 9 mortars in there is going to be awesome. But that all sounds great, and we move on to an additional battalion. Obviously, basically only an Imperial Guard do you get a battalion plus a brigade. So we're already at 20 CPs here, and we're bringing in a full-on Tempestus Scion detachment. They are using the 9th Iotan Gorgones Regimental Doctrine, which is essentially just the Stormtroopers Doctrine. It gives your infantry exploding 6s when they shoot the closest enemy. Fortunately, that it is a little different than the standard Stormtroopers Doctrine because it doesn't require you to be within half range of your guns, which is great because I think a lot of this is going to be deep striking with their grav shoots. They just have to shoot the closest enemy unit. So if you can pick out an enemy unit that's fairly easy to kill, you drop in, these guys are going to do a ton of damage. That also scores additional hits on 6s for any weapon as long as it's carried by an infantry model. So I imagine we're going to see a lot of plasma guns. Yep, there they are. Look at all these plasma guns over here in this detachment, and they're going to be able to deal some significant damage rolling. So that's very cool. Not only do we have this enormous gun line here with a bunch of scout sentinels, a bunch of basilisks, a bunch of heavy weapons to pack at you from far away, as well as a wyvern. There's also a wyvern in here too. Why not? Just throw a wyvern in there. We also have all of these plasma guns that can drop in behind you. You have to screen out and potentially move out of cover to screen them out from the important core of your list, which just makes these heavy weapon teams kill your chaff even better. But the list continues. We're not out of points yet, boys. We have one additional battalion. This time we got a Talarn battalion with 2 tank commanders, so those guys are going to be able to move and shoot with the Talarn Special Order, as well as 3 more infantry squads. I imagine that we'll see the tank commander here outflank. He has a turret-mounted demolisher cannon that is only a 24-inch range, but because he's Talarn, he can outflank, come in from any table edge, and that is going to do a ton of damage to whatever poor, unfortunate unit gets caught in front of that big gun. Overall, this list seems super cool. I hope it ends up finishing its games. It has a ton of models. I guess they are all relatively small, so it's probably not that big of a deal. And most of them don't move. We're just going to sit in the corner and we're going to shoot. We're going to have a lot of board presence with these Tempestus Scions dropping in, as well as this tank commander coming in. And this list is going to force its opponents to really play in a very different way and really play defensively, which is something that Imperial Guard love because they will win that defensive game every single time. See, the army man of the 40k universe is sweet every time, and this list is a very cool list. Also, it brings 25 command points. 25! Can you imagine having 25 command points? That is an astronomical number of command points. What do you even do with all of it? Oh my god, it's just crazy. It's just crazy. Coming in from Isante here, we have an Imperial soup list. This is a very cool list, bringing in a couple different battalions from different Imperial factions. We have an Adepta Sororitas battalion here with a couple Battle Sisters and an Imagifer. That's going to give these guys the ignore -1, -2 AP. They have a couple Exorcists to further benefit from that, as well as a Rhino to keep these Sisters Repentia in and keep them safe. We also have 2 Seraphim squads jumping in with Inferno pistols. They can come in and use the stratagem to fire when they deep strike and double the range of those Inferno pistols, so they can do a ton of damage from out of nowhere, essentially. These Repentia obviously super scary with these Miracle Dice, being able to essentially guarantee their charges will go off. They can't get their +1 to wound stratagem because they are Valorous Heart and not Order of the Bloody Rose, but they do come in at a high strength, rerolling almost all of their hits and wounds with the Zealot ability and just hitting like a truck. We also have a Space Wolves detachment, so we're bringing in some of the Space Wolves from Saga of the Beast. Very exciting to see these guys come back on the table. And I like bringing them in a soup list since their Super Doctrine, while it's going to be good because it does affect them in combat, I don't think it's going to be that impactful. We see a bunch of Incursor squads as well as Intercessor. We see an Incursor squad as well as Intercessor squads to fill out the troops choices here, and a bunch of big old mean characters. We have the new Ragnar Blackmane. He just hits like an absolute truck in combat, especially with that ability to gain extra attacks if you're a character charging in. We have a Wolf Priest for their new litany abilities that they have, as well as Bjorn the Fell-Handed as a character dreadnought that can't be shot with a twin last cannon. Why not? Just he's like a little chapel dread, basically, that guy. Last but not least, we have a different Imperial faction. We have Imperial Fists coming in with the Primaris Captain bringing Hand of Dorn to get some CP back, as well as the Eye of Hypnoth to reroll 1s to wound, and 3 Thunderfire Cannons. Those guys are going to ignore cover because of the Imperial Fists doctrine. Obviously, they don't get their super doctrines, and none of the Space Marines are going to get their doctrines in this list because we have the Adeptus Sororitas here, so those guys won't be getting any additional AP, but I think that's okay. These guys certainly don't need AP, the Space Wolves characters here, and the Thunderfire Cannons don't need it particularly. They're going to be -1 AP base, and they're going to ignore cover, so mostly -2 AP, and that is just a very solid battery of shooting. They're going to be able to kill engineers, they're going to be able to keep infantry back, just a ton of damage coming out of these guys. So overall, I really love this list. I think it's awesome. We have the Space Wolves here, as well as the threat of the Sisters Repentia and the Seraphim squad to keep opponents back and take board presence, and then we have 2 Exorcists, as well as the 3 Thunderfire Cannons, really to hammer them if they play defensively. Very cool list. A very creative soup list. I'm very excited to see this one on the table too. Speaking of orcs, like we were earlier, we do see some orcs coming in from Susan, and Susan here is bringing in some of the awesome new stuff from Saga of the Beast. We see the new Gozgul Thraka making the field, new Big Mech with custom force field, as well as, oh boy, 180 Orc Boys coming on the table. We have 6 units of 29 Orc Boys, a real clean double battalion here. One of them is going to be Evil Sons with a Weird Boy. He's going to be in there to jump these guys across the table, get that +1 charge from Evil Sons, plus the reroll from just being an Orc, and those guys can make those 9-inch charges fairly reliably. Bringing up the rear, we have Gozgul Thraka, the unkillable beast, with his 4+ invulnerable save, is only taking 4 wounds a turn. We see a Pain Boy here, so we could potentially see the Meta Squig stratagem going off to give him additional wounds back and take additional phases to kill him. That's going to be sick. We have a Knob with a Wa banner here to give all these guys +1 to hit, and then just a million boys to benefit from Thraka's abilities and just march up the table after these guys to jump in and gain some board presence. This list is going to take the center of the table. This list is going to dominate the center of the table and just run at you with boys and hope you can deal with it. I think a lot of lists probably can kill the 180 boys, maybe not even that much of a problem, but can they do it in time for Thraka not to kick the crap out of them? That's going to be the real question, and I'm so excited to find out. So like I mentioned before here, one of the Adeptus Astartes lists coming in the tournament, coming from Glarg, is going to be a Raptors list. This is a pretty classic Raptors Raven Guard successor chapter list. We're seeing 2 Centurion Assault squads, as well as a Centurion Devastator squad with the Grav Cannons and Grav Amps to make use of that Grav ability. These guys can all use the Raven Guard ambush stratagem to deep strike in on the board later on. The big change in this list is that Centurions lost the ability to forward deploy with the Raven Guard stratagem, so we are seeing an Aggressor squad in place of one of the normally 3 Centurion Assault squads we would typically see. These guys aren't going to be quite as terrifying as a Centurion Assault squad. Aggressor puts out roughly the same amount of damage. They do have their Fragstorm grenade launcher that they can shoot twice, so they're going to be shooting a lot more strength 4 shots, but they're a lot easier to kill, and they don't have those flamethrowers to really punish infantry that try to take them out. I haven't seen this version of the list on the table, but I have have been tabled many times by the Centurions in the past. So I'm excited to see if and how the changes to the Space Marines affect this particular brand of Raven Guard. Over here we have my buddy Shumacord, that if you guys follow my YouTube channel, you guys just saw on another Tabletop Simulator battle report playing 27 Beasts of Nurgle into a Tyranid gunline. That was a super fun game and a super strong list, and now he's bringing out a little more of a ranged heavy version of it. So this is Shuma's typical tournament list. He's one of my local players, so I do play him quite often, but he is trying a couple new units in it, so it'll be interesting to see how it goes. We obviously have the Great Unclean One with the Doomsday Bell combo, and the cool thing about that is that it affects any Nurgle demon. So what the Doomsday Bell does is that any unit within 7 inches of them at the start of the turn that has lost any models, if they're a Nurgle demon, you roll a dice on a 4+, they get one of those models back, but they come back at full wounds. Now here's the trick. These Mephitic Blighthaulers, they're a Death Guard unit, and they're basically a little Dreadnought guy, but they have both the Nurgle and the Demon keyword, so they are affected by the Doomsday Bell. They're 8 wound, toughness 7 with a feel no pain, 3+ save models with a bunch of guns on them. They have both a missile launcher, standard Space Marine missile launcher, and a multi-melta. They get +1 to hit as long as 3 models are in their unit, and they start hitting on 4s, so they're typically looking at 3s to hit and rerolling 1s for the Demon Prince over here. So that is a lot of anti-tank firepower coming out of these 3 units here, and if you shoot back and kill any of them, which remember is very hard because each of these units is 24 wounds with a 5+ DPR, they're just going to come back from the Great Unclean One next turn. The real trick is taking out the Great Unclean One, but like we talked about before with the number of ruins that we're seeing on the table in the BCB ITC ruins map that we're using, there's going to be a lot of places for this guy to hide, and he is already very difficult to kill. Epidemius is also in this list, and with all of the models in the list being Nurgle demons, his tally goes up very quickly. It's not that hard, especially against chaff armies, to get to the 5 or 6 tally points that he needs to give this Great Unclean One +1 toughness, and once it gets to toughness 8 and is -1 to hit, has a bunch of wounds plus a DPR, it becomes almost impossible to take down. This list is also bringing in 2 Plague Burst Crawlers. One of the biggest issues is that while these guys are fairly fast, and there are some Furies in there to be able to go through walls and to just run out and grab objectives, there isn't a lot of firepower that really reaches out. The Blighthaulers bring a ton of shooting, but it's all direct fire and they need line of sight. So these Plague Burst Crawlers come in here. They have big flamethrowers that they can use to clear off enemies that are trying to get close to the Blighthaulers. Plus, they can use those big old cannons to threaten things like engineers or really defensive deployments. Overall, I've seen this list do a lot of damage on the table, and I think it's a super cool combination. I love seeing these off-meta lists hit the table, and I am excited to see if this one can do well in this tournament's meta. So last up in here, we have sort of the culmination of the Imperium list that we've been talking about before, coming from Doots. Doots is bringing in an Imperial soup list with 2 battalions as well as a Vanguard detachment. Effectively, one of these battalions is going to be Adeptus Sororitas, and that's going to essentially take the place of Imperial Guard in this particular list. We're seeing a lot of big units of Battle Sisters here with a lot of special weapons to really hold down the center. It's playing Valorous Heart and bringing 2 Imagifers to make sure all of these models ignore AP -1 and -2. If they're in cover, they're sitting on a 2+ save that's very hard to get around, and these big, huge units are going to be impossible to kill. So we're seeing 2 Exorcists for fire support and a Seraphim squad to come in, double the range of these heavy flamers, clear out a lot of chaff. An interesting combo in this list is that these Seraphim can come in, use their ability to shoot when they deep strike, double the range of their hand flamers from 6 to 12 and use them to clear out a bunch of infantry, then use the space that they just opened up to grav shoot in these Tempestus Scion squads. We see a lot of plasma guns in these Scion squads, so these guys are going to be able to come in and do a ton of damage like we talked about earlier. These guys are also running 43rd Iotan Dragons as their regiment, which adds 6 inches to the range of all of their rapid fire weapons. That allows them to deep strike in with these big units of 10 Scions and still get within 12. Normally their hotshot las guns only reach 18, so to get half distance on someone, you wouldn't be able to grav shoot in and get that. But because they're running Iotan Dragons, they're going to go up to 24 inches and be able to drop within 12 of an enemy unit and get those double shots. So those 2 combos together I think are really cool. Plus, these guys can drop in and essentially just be replenishable screens. You can drop 10 Scions across the board, maybe chaining between some objectives or something like that. Then when your opponent shoots them to death, the next turn you just do the same thing. You have 3 squads of them. You can just keep dropping in the same unit. Between that and all of these Battle Sisters, making up the front line of your army. That keeps the enemy off of your big guns. All the while, you're threatening them with these plasma gun squads and Seraphim squads in the back. Bottom of the document is my list. I'm just playing some double Paladin Grey Knights with a bunch of strike squads. Honestly, it's not that exciting. So anyway, that is the breakdown of the list from the first T5S2 tournament. I am so excited to get this thing on the road, and the first round pairings have already been up. We already have some really interesting pairings going in. We do see a lot of Imperium on Imperium action, so that'll be interesting. Hopefully that means that we'll get some Imperium versus Chaos or maybe some Xenos later on in the tournament. I'm going to be playing my first game tomorrow. That's going to be April 16th, probably sometime in the evening. I'm on Eastern Standard Time. I'll probably be playing at 9 or 10 at night. As you can see, I'll be playing versus Adeptus Mechanicus with my Grey Knights, and it'll be an interesting game, and I will be live streaming that on YouTube, so absolutely check it out, youtube.com/tacticaltortoise, and yeah, come hang out. I'm going to be streaming all my games from, and as many other games that I can spectate or get into. Obviously, I'll be making updates about the tournament and interesting games that happen, so stay tuned on the channel for that. I'm so excited to get this competitive event off the ground and keep competitive 40K going during this time of social distancing. So I hope you guys enjoyed this list breakdown and learned some cool combos from these interesting lists that we're seeing for the T5S2 tournament. Like I said before, if you guys are interested in joining this tournament, go ahead and hit us up on facebook.com/tacticaltortoise. We'll add you to the waitlist. Hopefully, it shouldn't be more than a week or two before we start a second heat, and anyone on the waitlist obviously will get first dibs on spots. So thanks again for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, and comment. Check out Tactical Tortoise on Patreon. We have some Patreon exclusive videos coming out very shortly up, and as always, keep it classy, folks.